bit. I'm here today with a guest I'm very excited about, Pia Silva. Pia is the founder of the No BS business model for solo experts who want to scale to $500,000 without employees. She's the author of two best-selling books, Badass Your Brand and Scale Solo, for experts who want to profit more, deliver faster, and cut the BS. Pia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kay. I'm happy to be here.
Let's hear a little bit about what things were like before you landed on this no BS business model.
Sure, happy to. And yes, very much a lot of trial and error over many, many years and lots of practice and lots of getting over many fears. So this is not how I was born at all. Um, in fact, we started our business over 15 years ago, my husband and I. He was my fiance at the time. He's an artist. And he also was a graphic designer. He was freelancing. And at a certain point, I said, you know what? Let me let me get the clients. You just do the work that you're really good at. We have very different brains, if you can imagine. So very, very talented and creative, but not necessarily great at the business side. And that's really how we started. I didn't know anything about design or branding or consulting businesses or anything. So this is very much school of hard knocks. And we did in the first few years everything in retrospect, everything wrong. I copied what everybody else did, and we ended up building this small agency. We had a couple of employees. We moved into this office that I'm recording from, and we were able to generate revenue. But 3 years into business, we found ourselves in $40,000 of debt, despite having generated about $250,000 in those previous 12 months. And I felt like a complete failure. I had no idea what was wrong. I was working so hard and credit cards maxed out, no cash in the bank. And so we ended up having to fire our employees, which was devastating to me. I thought I was going to have to go get a job. And luckily, my very different brained husband was like, we don't need to get a job. Like, we just need to think about this differently. We're very talented. We have happy clients. We're making sales, Pia. We just have to take a step back and do this differently. And what we ended up doing was focusing on these intensives that we had been doing secretly for a year, these low priced intensives. We're doing these $3,000 one-day intensives, and we were doing them on the side while I was desperately trying to sell these $30,000 6-month projects. That's what ended up landed us in debt. So we cut it all down. We said we're just going to do these 3-day, one-day, and $3,000 one-day intensives. And within the next 12 months, we did $500,000, just the two of us, because the model was different. Because the $3,000 one day and the $5,000 2-day were so much more profitable. So while I had been chasing these big shiny numbers, I didn't understand at the time how unprofitable those big projects were. And I got to really experience it by focusing on these lower priced but much more profitable projects. And that's where it all began. And then over years, I increased the price significantly. Within a year, that $3,000 one day became a $10,000 one day. And our process got tighter, our deliverables got more valuable, everything about it got more valuable. And now we do $40,000 2-day intensive branding projects, and they're very profitable. And that's what I teach other people how to do.
You mentioned you started out copying other business models. Of course, our framework is being uncopyable. One of our favorite sayings is look at what everyone else is doing and don't do it. Sometimes it's easy to get sucked into what we see. And Steve and I, and your husband's name's Steve too. I think
Yep.
that's coincidental. But we do know we've always been a two-person show. And we've seen these other speakers who would get big fees, a lot of bookings, and we realized how much work they had to do just to justify and pay for all of that infrastructure.
Mhm.
So that's exactly what you are talking about.
Mhm.
Intensive, just in case our audience doesn't know what that means, you alluded to it, concentrated amount of time and effort that's profitable for you. But I know from your research that it's also delivering results to your client. That I think you said, or I inferred that they're buying your expertise. They're buying, as you said, the deliverable. They're not interested in spending a lot of time either. So I see it as a win-win. One of my concepts too. Win for you, win for them. So just explain, how do you lead an intensive? What does that mean?
Sure. So I'll use us as an example first, but this can apply to any service that high premium service that you deliver. So we had been selling $30,000 projects and delivering them the way everybody else did, which is over many months. In fact, I would stretch the timeline out in the free proposals that I wrote to justify the price. So this was, a multi-month process with, okay, we're going to present the mood board and then we're going to get feedback and then we're going to see you a few days later and we're going to give you the edits and we're going to do that for every step of this process. I mean, it's painful to even think about now. And the intensives is a completely different. It's not even the same universe. For the intensives process, the deliverables are the same. So we will do an entire the brand strategy, all the messaging, the copy, the design and build of the brand and the website, but we deliver it in a 1, 2, or 3-day intensive. Now, that means that we do our first step up front, which is a paid interview I called lead product, an LP, which we can chat about. But a client hires me up front to basically figure out what their strategy is and give them a plan. And then if they choose to move forward for us to execute it, we apply the fee that they paid for the LP to the main project. But because we got paid to do that first upfront work and create the plan, we know exactly what this brand needs to be. So Steve and I then go back and we basically do the entire project from beginning to end. There's no back and forth. There's no mood board showing. There's no look. We do the entire thing almost to completion. And then the intensive is really a process that we take the client through to unveil the work, get their feedback, make the last final tweaks, and then reveal the entire thing such that the brand is launched, the website is live at 6 p.m. at the end of the intensive. So I want to stress that whatever the intensive looks like for you, and I've helped people design intensives that are over maybe months because just of the nature of the service that they're providing. Sometimes it has to happen over time. But the idea is, how can we put very strict boundaries around the engagement so that our time is protected and actually deliver more value, not less, in the process?
When you talk about having a brand, I'm not sure exactly how you said it, but one of the things you said is the website. Do you do any of that work yourself, or do you hand that off or give them the roadmap? How does that work?
Oh, no, we do all of it for them. Yeah, the idea is that this is a very premium white glove service, so we have designed and built their entire website. Steve is the one who does the creative work, and I'm the strategy and copy and messaging, but we work very well as a team, and, what we found is that, especially because we focus on a specific niche, our moose, right? That
Yes.
we, over time, especially having done hundreds of these at this point, there's a lot of themes, right? There's a lot of nuanced themes when you're working with the same kind of client over and over again, doing a very similar kind of project. So that's where the efficiency comes in. That's where the repeatability of it that makes it so profitable comes from. Now, that doesn't mean that each project is some sort of copied template. Actually, what it does is it gives us the space to spend all of the time we do spend on this project on the bespoke customization of it. But everything else should be, I don't wanna say templatized, but it's so easy to repeat because we're not figuring anything else out so that our energy can be put into the most valuable part, which is figuring out what is so special about them and how do we articulate that and how do we visualize that on a website and in a brand.
It's interesting that you say that because for years we worked in the trade show world and we laughed, not laughed at them, we laughed with them. But so many businesses that are similar, they think that their problems are really unique. And of course, the details, they are unique, but a lot of the same problems, just like we talk about in our framework, having a specific moose, which you have, solo, scale solo, which by the
Mhm.
way, I saw Seth Godin endorsed your book. That's very big. And so that's good job for you.
Thank
That's
you. Very grateful for that.
yeah, so if he's endorsing what you do, I think that's a huge credibility. So I like the fact that you're giving efficiency to, or to yourself. You're doing it efficiently, but you're also adjusting and tweaking it to the customer. I think your concept of no freebies is really great because I have done free 20-minute calls, and I'll tell you, a lot of times I get someone who's trying to pitch me, or, you
Mm.
have a moose that you don't know is really willing to invest the money. And it seems like those calls, they're not a huge amount of money, but they're enough that they have skin in the game. Would you agree?
So the way that I think about it is I do have a free fit call, but I wouldn't call that a freebie. So a free fit call is something different. It's called a fit call for a reason. They usually already know what the price point of my offerings are. And they're booking the fit call so that we can both figure out if this is a fit. So that's a different kind of conversation, right? I am genuinely trying to figure out, do they have a problem that I feel like I can solve? And do I recommend doing this first step? Because I would never want to do a lead product, which is an interview with a strategy brief after. I would never want to do that for someone that I didn't feel like was my perfect avatar. Because while I am happy to give advice to anyone, I love giving advice, wouldn't be the best person to give advice, for example, to an e commerce business. So I would want to get on a call with someone and figure out that they are, in fact, an e commerce business. So I can say, I'm not a good fit for you. So the fit call can be very short, but what I love about having that first paid step is instead of getting off the fit call and saying, okay, great, what so many people in our industry do, let me go write you a proposal. And then we go down that road. We say, great, you're a perfect fit. Here's the next step, and this is how much it costs. And I usually recommend that people keep their LPs between $500 and $1,000 until they are so booked that they need to increase it, because the whole purpose of it is getting paid to do a really thoughtful plan and strategy for them that makes you the inevitable solution to actually executing it.
Our frameworks in many ways are similar, although you've created something very unique. But I just did a program about the moose, your ideal prospect. I think you get huge credibility, Pia. What you just said is that you're not going to sell the wrong kind of prospect. It's not going to help them. It's not going to help you. It's not going to spread word of mouth. And yeah, I think a lot of time a sales problem or a closing problem is just that you haven't targeted correctly. You haven't put the time in up front. So I think that is really, I keep saying, I don't want to say the same words. Very brilliant, very smart. And also the point that people aren't really paying for time. I like that you pointed out why, sometimes there's a temptation to pad that time and add more stuff for the sake of adding stuff and making the client think that they're getting more when really there's no reason to add all that if it doesn't develop results.
Mhm.
And business owners, coaches, your market, your solo entrepreneurs, super busy. They don't want to spend all that time. So you're giving them value in the shortest amount of time. I think that's really huge.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I find that the biggest mindset shift that I'm trying to help people make is that actually it's more valuable to make it shorter. Actually, when people are busy and they're buying an outcome, they really don't want, not only do they not want to spend, they don't want you to spend more time unnecessarily, but they don't want to spend more time. So I try to shift their mindset that it's actually doing them a favor to say, hey, we're going to do this in 2 days, and give them and lend them your confidence. Yes, we absolutely can do an incredible project and only work with you for 2 days. That's why you're hiring us. You're hiring us to show you what this looks like, not to take you through this 6-month process. For what purpose? Right? Like, we know what we're doing. So it's a different mindset. And I think that I wouldn't have understood that in the first few years of business, because I would still be stuck in that thinking of dollars for hours. They're paying for my effort, not my expertise. But I could argue I didn't have expertise in the very beginning. So maybe that made sense. And then as I built them, I realized, oh my gosh, the better I get at this, the less time it takes me. Why would I get paid? Why would I want to get paid less for that? I should be getting paid more for that.
I One thing that fascinates me is the concept of the paradox of choice, and I can't remember the author of that book.
Hmm.
Sorry. But simplicity, confused buyers don't buy. I like craisins, and it drives me crazy when I go in to buy craisins and there's low sugar craisins and cherry infused craisins and pomegranate, and there's just all these choices and I get frozen. So I do like the fact that you boil things down and instead of giving them a whole bunch of information they might not care about, you're giving them what they need to act and be successful.
I'll add another thing to that. The reason, especially as a solo person, we don't have the bandwidth to have lots of options to juggle. And when we even though I recommend having three main offers, three levels of an offer, it's really
Mhm.
just one offer at three different sizes. And I don't even recommend you let a client pick. I recommend that you do the lead product and then at the end you say this is the one that you need. And that's it. So that's another thing I'm always correcting or giving advice on for my students when I read their lead products, especially when they make the mistake of saying, "Well, here are my 3 packages, which do you wanna do?" And I say, "That's not being the expert. That's not leading them. You know enough about their business to say, 'I'm advising you that this is what's going to get you the results.'" And people actually trust that more.
Right, so you're telling them to give recommendations, and you're doing the same thing, and
Right.
I've always believed in that too. If you can build that level of trust, like you just said, you're not gonna sell the wrong product to the wrong business, then when you say, "Here's what I recommend," sometimes it might be, "I recommend something else," but you
Right.
are such a believer in your system, and I can see why, that as long as it's a fit, I know that your system. Yeah, and the ABC package, I do that. I have done that at times, and, the B package is the one that you want them to take, and then you're like, "Okay, here's the lower end that sucks, and here's the higher end that's gonna cost you a lot more." So,
Mm.
it depends on your approach, and I always say selling for everyone is different. I was talking with a client the other day about spin selling and the challenger sale and all these different methodologies that are just so involved in the details and taking control, and I think making things too complicated, and your goal is to simplify. If you're delivering this in one day, it has to be simple.
Mhm.
So, you are selling your experience, and of course, the more you do this, the more experience that you get, and have to deliver, and you're compressing that into a day. Would you agree?
I'm compressing it into a day or 2 delivering it with the client, but we do all of this work up front, so there are a few days of work up front.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Of
Yeah.
course. Yes, yeah, you don't come in cold and say, "Let's figure out what do
No,
we want? What
not
do
at all. Not at all.
we
And,
want?"
we were doing it more like that in the very beginning, and I would say that was more akin to what people call a VIP day, right? You're buying my day, and we're gonna d like, the first version of this, before we even when we were doing it secretly, the first version of this was, "You get us for the day, and we'll do as much as we can." And over time, because we didn't wanna just sell what we could do in a day, we actually wanted to solve the problem with a much more robust solution. Well, that just can't be done in a day. So, obviously, over time, we developed this process where it's like, "You know what? We can actually do the whole thing up front." And because we've done it so many times, it doesn't take us that long to do.
And that's encouraging for us listeners that you can morph and grow and make changes. I mean, I had one client that this is kind of off topic, but they chose a moose that just wasn't right and they weren't getting anywhere and they switched to a different moose and it worked out great. So just because you start somewhere doesn't mean you're stuck there forever. You've committed yourself to to life. What would you say? What kinds of problems would you say that you solve? Or what position would someone be in when they say, I need you to help?
Well, now that I teach this model, usually I am working with people who are feeling overwhelmed by all the juggling of all the clients. They don't feel like they really own their time. They don't feel like they can really take a proper vacation and leave their laptop at home. And they feel like they're working a lot, but they're never really getting ahead. And they're probably in that famous feast or famine where they're either overwhelmed with work and clients, they're making money, but they're working a lot, And then when things slow down because a couple clients leave, then they're panicking because they don't know how to get the next client because they have no pipeline, because they haven't been building a pipeline because they've just been working with clients. And it's just around and around they go. A lot of times I will work with somebody because they thought their business was doing really well because they had a couple of really high paying retainer clients. And then one or two leave, and then they realize they don't have a pipeline. And all of a sudden, they have no idea how to get clients. And I rail against retainer work a lot, which is very counter to what most people are chasing, not because they are inherently bad. There is a way to do a retainer project profitably, but most people aren't doing it profitably. And I find that retainer work gives this false sense of security. So I've spoken to so many business owners who will tell me, well, I was doing great for 2 years because I had two $10,000 a month retainer clients and I didn't need anything. And then one left and then the other, and now I have nothing. And I tell them, well, that wasn't really a business. That was you had two freelance jobs and then you lost them. Like, that's very different. And that's an aggressive thing
Really?
to say, but I think it's important because in order to have a business, you have to know how you market and sell your services. And if you're just working with retainer clients and you're not putting energy into the marketing and the sales, you don't really have a business. You've got a bunch of part-time employee jobs. So I say that to be harsh, to wake people up who think they're in a good position because you are one or two clients dropping away from being in a really bad position. And I want to teach people how to build sustainable small businesses. And the key is to own your pipeline and understand your sales process. And on top of that, you can take retainer work if it's profitable. But I always say you should be able to sustain with project based work because that requires you to know that your pipeline is always bringing new people in the door.
And also retainer work is stressful.
Yeah. And retainer clients usually don't pay as well and end up expecting you to be on call for them. And you are on call for them because you don't want to lose them. It's a terrible relationship. If you're going to have a retainer client, you have to start it with such clear boundaries that that doesn't happen, in my opinion.
Well, your opinion is, you know, this is working for you for sure. So, how do you I'm curious, number 1, how you get clients and and also as much as you can tell in these few minutes,
Yeah.
how you recommend that your clients get clients.
Yes. So I'll do those reverse. So the way that I recommend my clients get clients and the way that I got clients for my branding agency for many years was through relationships, really. I teach something called the 1KO, the one killer outreach strategy. There are a lot of different ways to do this, but the idea is how do we simplify our marketing strategy in the real world so that we're just kind of repeating the same thing and not having to think about it too hard. And the lowest hanging fruit 1KO is to host little gatherings on a regular basis. So for years, I would host, because I'm intense like this, I would host 3 events every single month. So I had a monthly poker game, I had a monthly marketing breakfast, which I both hosted here, and then I had a monthly dinner or happy hour that I would just pick a restaurant and I would invite people to. So every new person I met that I wanted to get to know better would get an invite to one of these. And everybody I wanted to stay in touch with would periodically be invited to these different events. And that just gave me a very clear and specific way to constantly be giving value, introducing people, and having real life interactions with the people that I wanted to nurture relationships with. And all my business basically came from that. And so that's what I recommend to people now more than ever with the AI
Mm,
insanity in the
yes.
content online. Real relationships are where premium clients come from. When I wanna hire somebody for a premium service, I text all my entrepreneur friends and ask for recommendations. I don't go online searching for a stranger. I ask my friends who they recommend, and I always hire those people. So, to me, it's the best way. You wanna be somebody that lots of other business owners or people that are your kinds of clients or referral partners know about. How I get clients now, I have built quite a bit of content over the last 13 years, and, so that has helped me tremendously, right? I have 2 books, and I have a podcast, and I have a TED Talk, and I used to have a Forbes column, and I'm on social media, not as much as I always feel like I should be, but I will say, if I was starting now, I have the benefit of the longevity and also having started the content at a time when making a lot of content was really hard because it was so manual. And I think that's very different now. And I think it's a much harder uphill battle now, honestly, because you're fighting against the fact that there are people who because anyone can make tons of content with a click of a button. And at the same
Mhm.
time, it's terrible and it doesn't require you to do the heavy mental lifting of coming up with your own concepts. Calling your ideal client the moose is your concept and it's very effective. It's very sticky. It's something you own. And AI is not going to come up with that for you. And if it does, it's going to be stealing it from someone else. And that is the kind of thing that comes from just writing a lot and thinking a lot and sharing a lot and teaching a lot. And so I'm thankful for those years where I was just slogging away in my own brain with a pen and paper, like writing articles and getting better at writing and synthesizing my thoughts. So exactly, exactly. Yeah, writing a book yourself without AI is a labor of love, but it gives you so many benefits for forever after.
If you were to start over, what would you do differently? Or if you were to start today?
Yeah. So to start today, I would be putting all of my energy into I mean, if we how much are we starting? Are we talking about I've never sold a service or I'm very expert in my service and I'm starting a business? Those are 2 different things.
Let's say we'll pick one. Let's say you're an expert.
Okay,
You're an
you're an
expert.
expert, but
You're
you're starting your business. Yeah, okay. So I would put all of my energy all day, every day into connecting with everybody I know, building my network, deepening my relationships, and I would be asking people for case study clients to work to put some projects on my roster as quickly as possible. So to me, especially even if, as I work with a lot of people like this, they've been in corporate for 20 years, they have an incredible amount of expertise but when they come into their own business, they have no idea what to do. And sometimes they think that they should be able to get paid. They're like, "Oh, well, I'm not charging as much as the company that I was working for is charging, so I should be able to immediately get paid these very high prices." And I think we won't say what those prices are. I think they're different for everyone, but I think it is humbling when they realize it's a completely different thing when somebody is hiring you directly and I'm personally of the opinion that even if you are incredibly expert at what you're delivering, when you've never done it directly for a client, you don't have the process and the framework that actually makes it valuable. So, as an example, there are incredibly talented designers, student designers, and they are not worth the same simply because they do not know how to manage a client, manage a project, communicate their ideas, run a sales call even, or all of that stuff is so important for how much something is worth and how much somebody will pay for it. So that's the reason I would get people as case study clients. You can get paid, but you're just not going to get paid what you're going to get paid in the future in the beginning because you're still working on your process. So focus on the people in the network as much as possible and get those first clients on the roster so you can get them out of the way and really see what this is going to look like.
they are 2 different skills, being
Mhm.
able to do something and teach it in a way that makes sense, simplifies, gets people results. And I know we're not gonna have time to go into some of your frameworks, but you have some acronyms, things that are just like you said with Moose, sticky, something
Mhm.
sticky that people can remember. I just think from personal experience, I just went to some seminars this summer, and afterwards, really, I couldn't remember a whole lot of what I'd learned. And of course, what I remembered were the stories, and that's why you can separate yourself from AI and be memorable. So let's just tell people what the next step with you to take with you. I know you have the nobsmastery.com playbook, which is great. You have free downloads. You have these fabulous books. So where would you say someone should start?
Yeah, I mean, if any of this resonates, I would say there's 2 things. There's checking out Scale Solo. You can find that wherever books are sold. I I launched it with the ebook, paperback, and audiobook. So a lot of people like listening to me read it.
Mhm.
Or you can go to nobsmastery.com/playbook, which is almost like the cliff notes of the book, which is a free download. And you can just go check that out. And maybe if you're waiting for your paperback, you can skim through that first to kind of get an idea. But to your point, those sticky ideas and frameworks and branded concepts are really important for your brand, and they take a while to develop because I've made tons of ideas like that, and some of them stick and some of them don't, and you almost sometimes don't know which ones are gonna stick and which ones aren't.
Well, I kind of screwed up the ending there, so I'm recording this after my conversation with Pia. And when I listened to the interview again, what struck me and what stuck with me, as AI would say, is that a lot of times we get into a rut or we get into the habit of doing the same thing the same way again and again. My conversation with Pia was a great reminder to step back and analyze your business. What's working now? What are we doing that maybe never worked at all? And how can we improve that and open up a whole new set of opportunities? Now, if you want to learn more about Pia or more from Pia, her book, Scale Solo, is available wherever books are sold. She also has a Cliff Note version of that book, and you can get that at nobsmastery.com/playbook. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.